Narayana Samarambam Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Vasudevendra Yogindram Natva Jnana Pradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitartaya Tattva Bodha Vidiyate. In the last video, we basically wrapped up our discussion on the logic behind discrimination. And we covered 3 basic points. And these are 3 points that you have to remember and keep with you as you continue to study Tattva Bodha or any other Vedanta text for that matter. Point number 1 is that you are the conscious subject. Everything known to you is an unconscious object. Since it's known to you and it's unconscious, it cannot be you, the conscious knower. Point 2 is that you are always present and unchanged. That means that you, the self, Atma, are real. The objects that are known to you are not always present, and they continuously change. So they are unreal. You, the ever-present, unchanging, real self, cannot be the transient, ever-changing, unreal objects. And the third point is that you, the self, exist independently. You don't depend on anything external to yourself. You don't depend on any kind of object, any particular kind of experience to be the non-dual, limitless consciousness that you are. However, all of the objects, which we talked about being nothing but forms with names applied to them, none of those objects exist on their own because they depend on what? They depend on you, consciousness, to be known to exist. So you are independently existent consciousness, the word is satya, and the objects are dependently existent and they depend on you. They are mithya. Now, we're going to move on in the text in this video, but I want to make one more comment about point number 3 regarding independent existence. We've said that you are consciousness. That is your nature. And we've dispelled the notion that consciousness somehow comes from the brain or from the mind. To repeat what was said in the last video, consciousness, meaning you, are not a part, property, product, or function of the body, the brain, the mind, or any combination of the body, brain, and mind. All of those things are objects that appear in you and are therefore unconscious. They are not self. So we've dispelled that notion. There is another notion that consciousness needs something to be conscious of in order to be conscious. Now, this is something that we have to investigate here because we just said that as consciousness, as the self, you exist independently. You depend on nothing to exist. You depend on nothing to be what you are. And we're saying that what you are, what your nature is consciousness. So, would that continue to be true if you had to have something to be conscious of? You can only know or be conscious if there's something for you to be conscious of. Well, that would disprove that statement, wouldn't it? Because if I have to have an object to be consciousness, then I don't exist independently. Now, we've already pointed out that existence doesn't depend on perception or the functions of the mind. Perception is a thought or a function that appears in the mind, so we can put those in the same category and say that existence does not depend on perception. We covered this a little bit in the last video. Why does it not depend on perception? Because existence is consciousness. They are the same thing. They're not two aspects of the same thing. They are the nature of you, of the self. Perception is an object. Perception itself, what you see, what you hear, what you taste, touch, smell, etc., that perception is a thought that is in your mind, therefore it's an object. So perception itself is dependently existent. It has no existence of its own. It only exists because you exist. So that means that whatever is seen, whatever is smelled, tasted, touched, whatever is perceived is a dependent object. It means that you don't depend on it. So you don't depend on any objects to be consciousness. You don't depend on any objects to exist. There doesn't have to be any objects for you to exist, for you to be conscious. Consciousness doesn't require an object. And a good example might be to think of the sun. We can say that what the sun is, the sun's nature is light and heat. You can't have a sun apart from light and heat. The sun is light and heat. Now let's just imagine for a moment that space was completely empty. There's no planets, there's no moons, there's no asteroids, there's no particles of dust, there is absolutely nothing. Space is completely empty except for the sun. That's all that there is. So we take everything out of the solar system, everything out of the galaxy, all of the stars, planets, asteroids, comets, subatomic particles, dust, anything. We take all of that out and we're left with absolutely empty space. Now, if there is nothing at all in space except for the sun, would the sun cease to be hot? Would the sun cease to be bright? Would it cease to be light? Just because there was nothing there for it to heat up or nothing there for it to shine on? You know, if there's no earth there for the sun to warm, or if there's no earth there for the sun to illuminate, would the sun suddenly cease being hot or being bright? No, it wouldn't. And the reason is because heat and light is the very nature of the sun. The nature of the sun doesn't depend on anything besides the sun to be what it is. It doesn't have to have an external object to be what it is. It is light, it is heat, so it doesn't have to have something to shine light on to be light. It doesn't have to have something to warm up or heat up to be heat. Now similarly, we're saying that your nature is consciousness. That's what you are. You are consciousness itself. Now if that's the case, does there have to be a perception there for you to be what you already are? Does there have to be an object present for you to be what you are? No, there doesn't. So that is one last point here that I want to make about the logic behind discrimination. is that you don't, when we say that you exist independently, we're saying there doesn't have to be any objects there for you to exist. There doesn't have to be any objects there for you to be conscious. Consciousness does not have to have an object to be conscious of. It is consciousness, the same way that the very isnness or nature of the sun is heat and light. That's what it is. And so that does not depend on anything to make it so. So now that we've covered that point, we'll go ahead and finally move on here with the scripture. We've talked about so far, we've talked about the nature of bondage. We've talked about the qualities of mind that are required to successfully study Vedanta. And we've established that discrimination is the means to attain freedom. And that's where I'll backtrack to just a little bit. It's been a little while since we've actually read any verses here from the scripture. So before we move on into the next section, I'll just read the last few verses that we covered. Okay. So discrimination is necessary owing to the fact that the self, which is ever free, limitless, and unchanging, is mistaken to be the not self, the body, mind, and all forms of experience. Owing to this ignorance, avidya, the self is falsely believed to be subject to bondage, limitation, and change. Thus, suffering arises, and a means is required to remove it. That means is knowledge of truth, arrived at by discrimination. What is the knowledge of truth? It is the settled understanding that the self alone is real, all else, the not self, is unreal, and that I am that self, ever free of the body, mind, and experience. I am existence, consciousness, and limitlessness. So, just to recap this very quickly, we're saying that there is bondage or suffering, and the way to get rid of that is discrimination. We think that the world is real, and because the world is real, we worry about it. Something can only be worried about if it's real. We do not know what the nature of the self is, and we don't know that we are the self, so we identify with the body and the mind. And when we identify with the body and mind, then we inherit all of the limitations of the body and the mind. Change, suffering, sickness, death, etc. All of those things become ours. So the means to remove that is discrimination. Again, that's why we've been covering this topic at great length. And we are not finished talking about discrimination, because this is something that we're going to take with us and keep in mind the whole time that we study the rest of this text, especially this next section that's coming up. So we have this discrimination. That discrimination, when followed through to its end, leads to the settled understanding, meaning knowledge. Okay, clear understanding. We've already discussed that moksha or freedom is not any particular experience or the maintenance of a particular experience or even the maintenance of a particular thought. It's not as if you have to continuously maintain discrimination as a process indefinitely for moksha, because if you had to depend on that particular mental process, then you wouldn't be free. You would be dependent on that mental process. What we're saying here is that you continue discrimination until what? You have a settled understanding. And that means that your understanding is completely firm, unwavering, and free of doubt. To put it in kind of an everyday context, ask yourself if you need to be reminded that you are a man or a woman, or if you have to be reminded what your name is. Do you have to wake up in the morning and go, wait a minute, Okay, I'm a man. Shoot. What's my name? Oh, Vishnu. Right, that's my name. Got it. You don't have to do that. That is knowledge that is completely clear, doubt-free, and always available. It's not that you have to consistently walk around all day going, I'm a man, my name is Vishnu, my name is Vishnu, my name is Vishnu, so you don't forget it. It's always there, it's always present. There's no doubt about it. And if someone ever happens to ask you what your name is, that knowledge is always there and ready to use as needed. Hey, what's your name? Oh, hi, I'm Vishnu. Easy. So that's what we're saying here, is that it's not as if you have to continuously keep some kind of mental process going. We're saying that you do that mental process up until a point that all of your doubts are gone. Okay? Everything becomes clear, and that settled understanding is firm knowledge that does not leave. And that firm knowledge, if you want to sum it up in a sentence, is understanding that you, the self alone, are real, meaning you're ever present, you're unchanging, and that all else, meaning the objects or experience in general, is unreal. And you know that what? I am the self. I'm free of the body. It's an object known to me. I'm free of the mind. It's an object known to me. I'm free of experience. It is an object known to me. All of those things are unreal anyway. What am I? My nature is existence. My nature is consciousness. And my nature is limitlessness. Why am I limitless? Because I am not the body or the mind. Limitation belongs to the body and the mind. It's limited by time. It's limited by space. It's limited by all of the things that are inherent, all of the problems that are inherent with a body and mind. So what? If you're not the body and mind, then you don't have limitation. So the next section of the text starts to talk about the not self or anatma in detail. As I said before, this is not to prove the actuality of the not self. It's not to prove the actual existence of the not self. We're saying that it's just an appearance. In truth, there is only you. We say you are non-dual consciousness. That means that there's only consciousness with an appearance appearing in it. Now, in order to successfully discriminate, successfully make a distinction between what you are and what you are not, then it's helpful to describe and objectify the not self. So we have different ways to look at it. We have different ways to identify our identification with it. We start to look at our experience more specifically in order to be able to identify it and discriminate it from what we really are. And we can look at this not self, and by understanding what we aren't, we can get a clearer idea of what we are. So Vedanta does this in a couple of ways. We have the 3 bodies, we have the 5 sheaths, we have the 3 states. This one, the 3 bodies, is the Sharira Traya. Traya means 3, and Sharira means bodies. So this is one way that we can think about and objectify the not self. The first part is the gross body. The Sanskrit is Stula Sharira. Stula means gross or physical, and Sharira means body. So the question is, what is the gross body? It is inert, insentient matter, a combination of the physically manifest forms of the 5 elements, the 5 elements being space, air, fire, water, and earth. It is born due to good actions in the past and is the instrument with which experience of the world is gathered. After it comes into existence, it is born, it grows, it undergoes changes, it degenerates, and it dies. So, we have the gross body. Now, what is the gross body? It is inert, insentient matter. That's all that the body is, right? We talked about the brain a little bit in the last video when we said that the brain is just meat. The body is just meat. It's a bunch of muscle tissue, blood, fat, veins, tendons, hair, skin. It's just a pile of meat. And that meat is made of matter. As we've already talked about, matter itself is not conscious. Okay, it's inert. It doesn't have any consciousness of its own. And it's saying here that this matter is a combination of the physically manifest forms of the 5 elements. Now, you might say, well, space, air, fire, water, earth is an archaic way of looking at things. And the point is that it really doesn't matter. Vedanta just uses this particular cosmology to describe the way things are. That's it. It's just a particular way of looking at things. If you want to say there's 5 elements, or if you want to say that there's all of the elements on the periodic table, it really doesn't matter. When we say 5 elements, we are talking about matter. That's it. That's all that we're saying. So 5 elements, matter, same thing. It points out here to say that the body is made of the physical elements, the physically manifest elements. Okay, the name for that is the Mahabhutas, the great elements. Because we're going to also discuss, as we move on in the text, the subtle elements as well. You've got the physical elements that make up the physical body, the ones that you can see, the ones that you can taste, touch, and smell, and hear. And then you also have the subtle elements that make up your mind, your thoughts, feelings, etc. And we'll get to that in the next section. So it says here that what's the gross body? It's just a combination of matter. That's it. Matter is not conscious. The body is born due to good actions in the past. We don't really need to get into the whole discussion of karma here. It's not really relevant to the point. All we can say here is that the body is an effect. Everything that we're experiencing in any moment is an effect. And so there was a cause for the body. There were previous actions done that caused this body that you have now. One thing to know is that you can be grateful for that. You can be appreciative of the fact that you have a body, particularly a human body, because a human body, and more importantly a human mind, is required to seek freedom. You have to have an ability to think. You have to have a developed intellect to be able to do discrimination, to do Atma Anatma Viveka. You have to have that, and it doesn't appear to be something it doesn't appear to be an ability that an animal possesses, for instance. A cow or a dog or a bird doesn't have the ability to do discrimination and set themselves free. They just have to accept things as they are. They have to accept life as it comes to them. A bird, cat, a dog, something also like a plant, for instance. A plant is a living being. So obviously a plant or a tree can't do discrimination. All we're saying here is that the body is born out of good actions because it's a good thing. It's an auspicious thing to be a person because you're able to seek freedom. And this body that you have is the instrument with which you gain experience from the world. It is sort of like a countertop over which business is transacted. You interact with the physical world, with your physical body. That makes enough sense, right? You have to have a physical body to be able to interact and do actions and reap the results in the physical world. After the body comes into existence, it is born, it grows, it undergoes changes, it degenerates, and it dies. You might say, why do you say after it comes into existence, it is born? Aren't they the same thing? When we say it comes into existence, we're actually talking about the moment that the egg is fertilized inside of the body. So we're saying that the baby exists inside of the mother's body. That's when the body comes into existence first, when those cells start dividing. And we're saying that birth is when you actually, the actual process of birth, when you come into the world. So you're born. If you have a body that was born, it grows. It obviously changes as it develops. And then in due time, it starts to break down, it starts to degenerate, and it dies. So we've described the stula sharira, the gross body. Is this just some kind of, is this information for the sake of education so we can know all about the body? It really isn't. We need to look at the body here so we'll be able to discriminate it from ourselves. So this is where we bring back the logic, the method of discrimination that we've been learning in these last couple of videos. We want to apply this to every level of the not self in order to see it for what it is, an unreal object that actually does not affect us in any way, that does not have any kind of effect on us at any time. So, using the discrimination that we've been taught, how can we see that the gross body is not us? How do we apply this? And when people ask, what is Vedanta? As I've said before, it's discrimination. And then they say, okay, well, how do you practice Vedanta? Well, the practice of Vedanta, of course, is listening to the teaching and then contemplating its meaning. A part of contemplating its meaning is to use this discrimination on a moment-to-moment basis on the objects that are appearing in you all the time. So we have this body that appears in us. If it's not clear how it can't be us, we have to apply this discrimination until it becomes clear. And we'll run through this here real quick. So, what's the first thing? We've said that we are the conscious subject, correct? So, the body itself is an object. It's known to you. You can't say that you have a body unless it is known to you. The body itself is really just a collection of perceptions in your mind, right? To say that I see my body, well, you're seeing the thought of yourself, the thought of your body in your mind. I can feel my body. Well, the feeling, the perception of touch is appearing as a thought in your mind. Smell, taste, hear, all of that stuff are appearing as thoughts in your mind. So they are known objects. Those thoughts of the body are known objects. If they are known, then they are unconscious. You are the conscious subject, the knower, so you cannot be the body in that regard. Now, also we've said that you, the self, are real. And the definition of real is that you are always present and that you never change. Now, we've said right here in this verse, the body is born, it grows, it undergoes changes. That the body changes is completely obvious. The body changes from day to day, moment to moment. Even in the span of a couple of days or a week or even a month, it's hard to tell that there's any changes going on in the body. But what we know from science, for instance, is that the composition of the body is continuously changing. So even if outwardly the changes are not obvious, inwardly there are changes all of the time. So on that basis, you cannot be the body. You are the unchanging self. The body is constantly changing, so it cannot be you. You are real, and as real means that you are also ever present, you cannot be the body because the body is not always present. As I pointed out before, where is your baby body? Where's the body that you were born with originally? It's gone. Where's the body from when you were 5 years old? Gone. 10 years old? Gone. 15, 20, 25. Gone, gone, gone. All of those bodies are gone. The body itself is not always present, but you, consciousness, are always present. You have to be present to be able to say that the body has gone and a new body has come. If you left when the body left, you wouldn't be here to say that the new body was present. So, you do not change. The body continuously changes, and so you cannot be that body, and the body is not present, so you cannot be the body. All of those previous bodies are no longer present, and furthermore, your body is not present when you dream, and your body is not present when you are in deep sleep. Okay, when you dream, your physical body is not present. You might have a dream body, fair enough, but where's your physical body? If you're the physical body, it would be there in the dream, but it isn't. And if the physical body was you, and it was real, then it would also be present when you are in dreamless or deep sleep, but it is not there. So the body is not always present, you are always present, so for that reason, you also cannot be the body. We've also said that you are independently existent. You don't depend on anything else to exist. Now, is that the case for the body? Well, the body, as the verse says, is made out of matter. So, the body itself depends on matter for its existence. There is no body without matter. Okay, body itself is just a name that refers to a particular configuration of matter. Okay, the name just refers to the form. We say body. Just the same way that we say table, and table is referring to a particular form, a flat piece with legs coming out of it, and that particular form is only referring to the wood that it depends on. We've got this name body. It refers to this form, and this form is completely dependent on matter. So the body itself in that regard is not dependently existent. So it can't be you because you exist independently. And furthermore, if the body depends on matter, does matter exist dependently or independently? Well, since it depends on you, consciousness, to be known, then it exists dependently. There is no matter without you, consciousness, being present. And so, for all of those reasons, you can't be the gross body. And we've discussed what the gross body is and applied our discrimination to it to see why we cannot be the gross body. And that covers the very first part of the description of the not self in Tattva Bodha. It covers the Stula Sharira in the description of the three bodies, the Sharira Traya. And in the next video, we'll continue this discussion of the text when we start to describe the subtle body, meaning the mind and the physiological functions that animate the gross body. So come back for the next video, and that's what we will be discussing. Purnamidaf, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamadachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
to go